Warframe endgame. Is there an actual endgame in Warframe? Well, I'm reacting to this video that literally says Warframe will never have an endgame by MH Blackie. Let's see what it's about. I'm very curious. Very curious.
Warframe's recent update introduced the new game mode Deep Archimedea, which is probably the single most challenging content that the game currently has. However, more importantly, it shows that Warframe has one big problem with its quote-unquote endgame that I personally think pretty much nobody in the community is aware of. So, in today's video, I'm going to show you what exactly Warframe's issue with endgame really is, and also why it is...
I would say there's a few issues, but let's see what he has to say, and then I'm obviously going to respond. I'll pause the video, so on and so forth.
Flat out impossible for the developers to ever give us traditional...
By the way, comment down below if you actually think Warframe has a proper endgame.
Game content, even if they really...
And if you don't think it does, what could they do to implement said endgame?
Really wanted to. Big shout out to all my generous channel members who helped me keep the lights
shout
on.
them out.
And now, let's jump right into it. Alright, now before we jump in,
I want to
first make clear what type of video this here actually is. What I'm trying to do here is not complain about Deep Archimedea itself. You can surely like the game mode, you can dislike it, but that's not really the topic of today's video.
Right.
I just want to simply and objectively explain the current state of Warframe on a deeper sort of game design type of level, because I think we all need to be aware of this when we're discussing actual endgame content in Warframe. But now with that out of the way, what really is the deal with Deep Archimedea, and what does it tell us about the whole state of endgame in Warframe?
This is the hardest content in the game, I know that.
Now, about Deep Archimedea, I don't want to go into all the details. Just to put it very briefly, this is a high-level game mode where when you want to get all the possible rewards out of it, you're heavily restricted as to which Warframes and which weapons you can take into the mission, and you get additional debuffs on top of that that make it significantly more challenging for you to complete the whole thing. But as I said, that's not what I want to talk about today. What I do want to talk about, though, is that Deep Archimedea shows a very, very interesting trend that Warframe is going into currently. And that is that late game or quote-unquote end-game content nowadays seems to follow this blueprint. And that is restricting your loadout or inflicting additional mission debuffs to make it more challenging for us. When we, for example, look at the Deviri circuit, which was previously one of the more late-game modes, I mean,
it's fine. Right? It just make it a game mode, which they have, right? They have a couple different game modes. But it's kind of RNG based. And me personally, like I enjoy doing it, okay? I enjoy the Deviri circuit here, on Steel Path. I actually enjoy it. But I'll just let it play. Let's see what he says.
Also only had a restricted number of weapons and Warframes available.
Obviously want more.
To sort of see where this gets us. Or, for example, with the recent release of
Nexus, it is a trend of theirs, though.
This one uses additional debuffs to make the mission more challenging for us. And with Deep Archimedea now,
debuffs make it harder.
The next evolution of this type of
people like hard content,
and here's the big
including
thing
myself.
And the reason that I'm making this video. No matter if you like Deep Archimedea or not, these loadout restriction type of missions is the one and only way that the devs have to even remotely challenge us as players. And in the rest of this video, I want to explain very clearly why every single...
Okay, yeah, I'm curious to see what he says, because there is definitely other ways, but let's proceed.
Other way to make a game more challenging that other titles use is impossible in the case of Warframe. So let's jump right into that. Now, first of all, when it comes to making your game more challenging, there is one approach that has always and pretty much does always work with most games, and that is simply make the enemy levels higher. You know, if the enemy has a higher level, they take more damage from you and also dish out against you. For example, in Genshin Impact, the highest level that your character can possibly have is 90. However, the highest combat content in the game goes up to level 100.
That's like the base level of
needs to be pretty min-max in order to dish out enough damage against those boss enemies to kill them in time. However, in Warframe, this approach does not work at all. And here's why. See, the level cap for enemies in Warframe, as you probably know, is 10,000. Now, to be fair,
you never get it to 10,000.
10,000 is only encountered if you do long endurance runs or you play the debris circuit for like 1 or 2 hours. If you just play standard
no one's doing that.
Even if it's steel path, you will never see enemies even beyond level 1,000. So enemies level 10,000 are a niche case to begin with. However, let's just give it the benefit of the doubt and see what this actually would mean for the game. At level 10,000, just purely looking at the damage output of those enemies, each and every foe is potentially able to one-shot your Warframe. The only reason why competing with these enemies is even remotely possible is the mechanic of shield gating. You know, I explained this a couple of times already. If your Warframe has a shield and then that shield goes down to 0, you become briefly invincible and have the chance to recharge that shield before the invincibility period runs out, so that this way you basically stay invincible all the time.
I see where he's going with this.
It doesn't matter how much damage you actually take. And then on the flip side, sure, a level 10,000 enemy has a ton of armor and HP, but we have multiple Warframes and abilities that deal percentage-based damage or damage that scales with enemy level, like for example Zaku, Revenant, or Octavia. So that no matter if you're fighting a level 1, a level 100, or a level 10,000
Revenant Prime, man,
they always go down equally fast against those Warframes. And if we take both of that together, you know, the relative damage and the shield gating,
look at all that invincibility.
Then you instantly see why raising the level cap in Warframe wouldn't make it any more difficult. When the enemies would potentially one-shot us at level 10,000, then yeah, they will one-shot us at level 100,000 too. And shield gating will prevent this from happening the same way
generic,
it does at level 10,000. And at the same time,
I get what he's saying, but that's just a generic approach.
Is going to take care of those level 100,000 enemies in the same amount of time as well. So yeah, in contrast to a lot of other looter shooter type games, for Warframe,
that's kind of like the foundation. It's kind of like the foundation, right? Is just having the enemy be a higher level than you, essentially, do more damage. It's very generic. But there's still other things, other systems you can implement. So let's see. I'm curious, man.
Is not going to be able to make the game more of a challenge for us late game players.
Yeah, if you know how to shield gate.
When increasing the enemy level cap doesn't work, then we actually don't have to do that. You know, a lot of games out there don't even need enemy levels at all, and instead they focus on making the enemies cleverer, making them outplay the player to actually force the player to play more strategically. AKA, many games out there get their degree of challenge from the enemy AI being smart. And as I'm pretty sure we can all agree, Warframe's AI is really more
sometimes,
they're not. So there might be some potential here.
They're not the best.
Let's go over that. In Warframe right now, the enemies behave very simple. They run into a room and walk up to you in a straight line, sometimes even, until they get into firing range, and then they stay where they stand and start shooting at you. Sometimes they walk a bit to the left and the right while they do that, but most of the times there is not really a lot of flanking or tactical positioning going on. They're just standing there waiting to be killed. So, how do other games handle those type of situations, and what do they do to make it more...
There's one game that I just played recently called Tom Clancy The Division, right? I'm sure you're aware of this game. If you're not, well, let me tell you this much. When you're on Legendary mode, right, the hardest difficulty in the game, the enemies are always flanking you, always pushing up on you, all the time. And if they're not pushing up on you, I mean, they're dishing so much damage, and not only that, they have heals themselves, and... they are constantly moving. They never sit in cover. They're never sitting still. So, obviously, these enemies don't really sit in cover. They just kind of run at you, like he's saying, in a straight line. So there's things you could do.
First off, in a lot of other popular
make the game
games, like
harder.
For example Destiny or Borderlands, or hell, nowadays even Helldivers, right? Enemies don't just walk up to you in a straight line. They know where you are, and they try to flank around you and attack you from multiple angles. This makes it a whole lot more challenging for the player because you have to take cover and you have to be aware of where the enemies even are.
Yeah, you got to be aware of your
surroundings.
surroundings.
Exposing yourself to a flanking attack. And then, in addition to that, we also have different enemy types, you know? We have snipers that stay further back and attack you from a range, but have a lot of damage potential. So, if they're there, you have to be careful when to stick your head out. And at the same time, we also have melee-focused enemies whose sole purpose it is to run towards you and sort of push you out of cover, which then again exposes you to the sniper enemies who are further back. And all this creates a sort of stress on the player to focus your targets, you know, pick which enemy to attack first in order for you to be able to overcome this combat encounter. And interestingly enough, this also even exists in Warframe itself. You know, we have our sniper enemies who have more range and do more damage. We have our melee enemies who walk towards us.
There's different types of enemies
who also deal relatively high damage compared to the standard grunts. And then, just like in other looter shooters, we of course also have our big bullet sponge enemies. However, while this game design is very common among shooter games, and while it works for Borderlands and it works for Destiny and it works for Helldivers, all of this, even if it was present in Warframe in its entirety, it would not work for Warframe. And here is why. See, in all other games that I've mentioned so far, you as a player have sort of the same physical restrictions as the enemies that you're fighting. Basically, you and the enemy have the
to a degree, but if you're talking about Destiny, no, that is not true.
The same moveset. In Warframe, however, this is drastically different. Enemies too can run around, crouch, shoot.
Okay, I get what he's saying now. I understand what angle he's hitting right now. So, you will have to add enemies that can obviously move almost as fast, if not as fast as you. Maybe have them being able to like blink or teleport and flank you, push you in different ways. I don't know. You could definitely make the enemies a little bit harder. Okay, I'm not. You can't say it's impossible. It is possible. It is. You'll just have to add frame-like enemies.
You know, the standard movement set. But you as a
That's
player,
not impossible.
You can jump super high with your bullet jump, you can run around the wall, you can even defy gravity in its core by aim gliding and make those super long jumps.
Oh yeah, 100%. Your movement is incredible.
Enemies, they cannot do that at all.
No, the enemies are on the ground.
This is the reason why tactical positioning,
they fly a little bit,
and
depending on the enemy.
Tactically thinking AI would not work for Warframe to begin with. If you see a sniper at the end
of
the
corridor,
corridor,
it all just depends on how you develop the enemy, though. That's what I'm saying. Like this point is still valid what he's saying, but my point is, there's definitely something you can implement in the game, as in a frame-like enemy that can almost move just as fast as you, right? Being able to blink, like I said, and then just having like there's already enemies in the game that do have abilities that kind of track you, you know, like the Jade Light. That's one thing.
Behind cover until you're close enough to actively fight them. In Warframe, if there's a sniper in the corner, you just bullet jump over there and punch him right in the face. In fact, and this is pretty funny, the most clever thing that the Warframe's AI could possibly even do is, as soon as they sense that you're on the ship, they would just destroy the mission objective.
That's not gonna work, dude. Come on, man.
Off screen so you cannot win, and then all get off the ship as quickly as possible,
right,
because they would know that none of them stand even the slightest chance to survive with you.
Unless you made the enemy smarter, right? Unless you made him smarter. What if you even made an enemy to where like they actually able to heal, like have like a healer, which I mean they kind of do, right? But like add more of them. I think there's still ways you can make this game harder. I'm not saying it's impossible. Okay, I'm not saying they should do it, but there is still ways. He's saying like it's basically impossible. No, you can't do it because Warframes move way faster than the enemies. Well, like I said, it all just depends on how you actually make the enemy, right?
It
all depends on
seconds. And
what kind of enemies you actually put.
Do we really want Warframe's AI
up against the frames?
Do we really want them to take a more tactical approach and take cover and spread out and flank around us or whatever? I think
for endgame, we're talking endgame, right? This is an endgame video. For endgame, I would have to say yes. Yes.
We don't, because Warframe in its core is a power fantasy game, and this whole power fantasy thing...
And you can still have that power fantasy with the enemies being able to move almost as fast, if not as fast as you. Okay? You
only
can.
really works if the enemies are basically nothing more than insects.
Because you can do so much damage as a frame, it's insane, dude. All the abilities and everything you get, plus the invincibility on top of that, I mean, I think you can. I really do.
But while better enemy AI makes other shooter games more challenging, for Warframe, this all doesn't really work.
I would say it does.
So, we basically established
I disagree to a slight degree, okay? Like I said, I've already explained myself, but let's just keep going, okay? He has other
increasing
talking points here.
Doesn't work for Warframe. Increasing the enemy AI cleverness doesn't work for Warframe. Therefore, the conclusion would be that combat in this game in general cannot be made more mechanically difficult in any way. I mean, if for you personally something comes to mind, then please let us know in the comments down below. I would be really curious to read through it. But as it stands right now, limiting your loadout restrictions is really the only way to make combat more challenging for the developers. But, you know, when it comes to challenging game design, combat is not the only thing, of course. We could, for example, implement more game design that focuses around Warframe's movement, you know, pose a challenge, not in combat, but in terms of movement.
You can do that too,
so
yes.
What about that? First of all, we would have to establish how a movement challenge even looks like. And luckily, this is actually not too far-fetched because we
they have some of that in the tile sets.
If we take a look at the Jupiter tile set, for example, you know, the big gas city, there are those really huge rooms with their outside area where there's just a few little platforms scattered across the big void, and your job is to make a way through that. However, we have a big problem with that. And that is, what I also previously mentioned, we have the bullet jump, and most of all, we have the aim glide, which pretty much switches off gravity altogether. Yes, you could make your way through that room the way it is intended, with the cables, with the wall running, with the bullet jumping from A to B, but what you could also do is simply make one bullet jump, switch into aim glide, and fly through
or use your operator and just blink out
meters further in the distance on
the
last platform. This is not skill, this is not a challenge, and this can be done by literally every player.
But you could also implement things that maybe since you can aim glide in the air, right, and you can actually shoot, make it to where you have to shoot certain like nodes or something. And this is, we're talking in game, okay? Make it to where you have to shoot certain nodes, or maybe you have to kill an enemy because if you don't, they're gonna knock you out of the sky. I mean, I think there is still things. There's still things you can do.
And even if they focus their room design solely around aim glide being a thing, you know,
and then this character
platforms more than 100
maybe stun lock you in the air. I don't know.
Then, well,
there's things you could do. It's tough.
Titania
it's definitely tough though.
So, as we see, also for movement, there are ways that we as players have to sort of circumvent anything that could make it more challenging. But what about stealth? I mean, after all, we're still space quote-unquote ninja.
That's not in-game, brother.
I'm gonna make this one quick. First of all, most of the game, as we know, is procedurally generated. So if we had a game mode that is solely focused on us being stealthy and not detected, this would be relatively difficult, you know, when the enemies are randomly placed in the level and the levels themselves are randomly constructed from pre-made tiles.
Spy missions,
that there would be situations
but the frame's going invisible for 30 minutes straight. I mean,
and without handcrafted stages that are specifically made for us players to have multiple intentional ways around the enemy, I think this whole stealth thing could be very frustrating. And what's more, we still have invisible frames like Ashe, Octavia, Loki, and Amara. And if the game were to tell us, well, stealth frames are forbidden on those type of missions, then this basically just proves the point that the only way to create challenge right now is restricting our loadout options. So stealth also doesn't solve the difficulty problem.
I'm gonna keep...
Alright, so if
I'm gonna talk about this more.
Nothing works to make the game more challenging, then how about we don't challenge the player's active mechanical skill, but rather their brain power? How about we implement very hard to solve puzzles that the players will have to finish together in order
What about actual mechanics where you have to, let's say you have two frames, okay? You have a mate and you, where you have to hit a button at the same time in certain locations of the map where it opens up a door, okay? Simple things like that, and you have to hit at the same time, so it's all about coordination. There's things you can do, man. I mean, I'm a Destiny veteran, okay? And I have a lot of hours in raids, Sherpaing raids, all that. So I would have to say they can still do things. I wonder if he's going to talk about raids in this. I'm curious. Because I think raids still provide a lot of in-game. Does it fix the in-game completely? No, but as long as you make the rewards good and the mechanics are fun, the bosses are fun. Obviously, there needs to be mechanics within the boss fights. Raids are it, man. That's like the pinnacle of pinnacle, you know?
Complete the mission. First of all, Warframe is a combat game. It simply is
where you can't solo the content at all. Like you have to have 3, 4, 5, even 6 people, you know, because of the mechanics inside the raid.
Puzzle game, and having puzzles that challenge our brains is not really what we're playing the game for in the first place, let's be honest. Also, and this goes back to the procedure.
Yeah, I still get what he's saying, but if it's end game, dude, you should at least have the option for people. There's some people that will never do raids, right? Even in Destiny, a lot of people don't do raids because they're solo players. It's okay, but at least it's there for like the veterans and the people that want to go that extra mile, okay, to get that gun you can't get anywhere else.
Procedural generation, procedurally generating an infinite amount of potential puzzles that always stay unpredictable is pretty much impossible, so they would have to be handcrafted. And when it comes to handcrafted puzzles, I'm a Warframe
puzzles
YouTuber, there are other Warframe
okay.
YouTubers out there, you can be very sure that all of the puzzle mechanics will be explained and acknowledged by the community within the first week after release. So that doesn't help to make the game more challenging either. But, Blackie, I hear you say, you have missed one critical point, and that is Eidolons. What about Eidolons? Eidolons satisfy all the criteria that you've mentioned so far. They are very well designed boss fights, they are challenging, and they even need a whole team of players working together as one unit for them to get the most out of it.
You know what? You know what's funny? I've actually watched someone from my fire team absolutely destroy an Eidolon solo. I didn't even fucking do anything.
What about that? Well, let's talk about that. And in order to give you my
very skilled player,
I need to mention one game that doesn't really have anything to do with Warframe at all, and that would be Crash Team Racing for the original PlayStation. Please bear with me for a second.
What's his angle?
I'm going somewhere with this. Crash Team Racing is a very easy game. Playing through the main story is fun, but incredibly unchallenging. The game is really easy. However, trying to play through the entire story from start to finish in less than 1 hour, now that is actually pretty challenging, and you need quite a lot of skill to make it happen. Now, what does that have to do with Warframe? Well, just like with Crash Team Racing, Eidolon hunts in and of themselves are not difficult. You don't need a good team to complete a Tridolon. Heck, you don't even need a team at all. You can solo a Tridolon, and even that is not really challenging. No, the challenge for Eidolon runs is getting as many Tridolon runs per night as possible. Yes, this is going to be challenging, and this will need a very competent team. The same way that for Crash Team Racing, you will have to have a lot of skill
to be like actually effective, yes.
An hour. However, this is a player-imposed challenge. It's not the game that tells you have to finish 7 Tridolons per night, otherwise you don't get anything. It's you. So Eidolons in and of themselves cannot really be counted as a
freedom is nice
challenging game mode. So, about the Deep Archimedea, you can surely like it, you can dislike it. At the end of the day, there are arguments both for and against it. However, with this
I'm not against that. I'm not against the Archimedea at all.
Video, I hope I could make it a bit
or
clearer
locking out
where
loadouts.
these whole quote-unquote loadout restricting game modes come from, and more importantly, what we rather need to focus the discussion on, and what we need to fix if we want traditional quote-unquote end game in the future. Another big
fix. Good video, by the way. I don't think you need to fix really anything. You just need to add more to it. You need to add more to the end game. And like I said, I'm a Destiny veteran, okay? I love raids. I love raiding. Okay? I love raiding. There's obviously boss fights you can implement. I know there is boss fights. He just said the Eidolon. I've been saying Eidolon, but it's the Eidolon, okay? The Eidolon fights. I know there's other fights you can do as well. I just can't name them off the top of my head. I'm sure you Warframe veterans can. But he has some good talking points. I really do think they need to implement some more, though. I mean, comment down below. Just tell me what you guys think about the end game. Okay? Is there an end game? And if you think there's an end game, possibly just think about where they could go with the end game. You know? Because if you have 5,000 hours in this game and you're still doing an Archimedea, are you sick of it? Do you want to do Eidolon hunts for the rest of your days? Or do you want to have some mechanically driven raid or something else on top of what you have already? Okay, so you have your farming, and then you will have to have a squad for this other activity. It doesn't even need to be a raid, but like that's what I kind of look towards, at least for endgame. Because there's already like incredible progression in the game with how many different mods you can acquire, plus all the frames. But once you get all that stuff and you're kind of like done with that, like where do you look towards, like, you know, for actual content? and I would definitely have to say raids are kind of, at least what I think. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree to it with me. That's okay. That's why I kind of wanted to, go over this. This is a good reaction video. But him saying never have an M game, I have to disagree. You can't say never, because they can always implement different systems in the game. They've already implemented so many things in the game. I think you could just keep adding to it. They had raids. They had raids in the game before, man. I wish I played this game when the raids were in, just to see how they were. Maybe I should watch some old videos. I'm curious to see what a Warframe raid really was. Maybe that'll open my eyes, and maybe this game will never have a raid because it just can't, or the developers don't want to go that way. I'm not sure, man, but it would be cool to see. I would love to see it. Anyways, that is the end of the video. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Comment down below. Just tell me what you guys think. Go subscribe to MH Blackie unless you already are. He's a big content creator. Like the video here. It was a great video, man. But anyways, I'm out. We'll catch you soon. Adios.